Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast, along with Patrick Brown. I am Ryan Callahan. On this Thursday edition of the podcast, Tennessee getting ready to travel to Mississippi State for the first time in 13 years. This is one of the last two stadiums in the SEC where I have never attended a game, so looking forward to making the trip to Starkville. Patrick, I know you're eager to go listen to some cowbells Saturday afternoon. Hope you're doing well. Hope everyone else is doing well, and appreciate you listening in to this episode. Plenty to discuss as the Vols get ready to hit the road for the first time, for their first true road game, I should say. They did go to Atlanta about a month ago for that season opener against Syracuse. That feels like somehow more than 4 weeks ago. But lots happened since then, and we now have a lot to discuss about this game and about the schedules to come for Tennessee over the next few years. We'll get to that here in just a minute. But Patrick, hope you're doing well, and thanks for joining us on this episode as always.
Yeah, it's the Thursday before hitting the road. Got to do some driving. I know you'll be. I'm not going to reveal your location, your plans for checking out some high school football somewhere in the United States of America on Friday night. But
Arizona, maybe.
I'm going to try something new. Well, I'm not saying new, but because this has been such a long time, as you talked about. I'll be in Tupelo tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. I don't want to stay in Tuscaloosa because, it's Tuscaloosa. But it's funny. I looked up hotels for the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa for the Alabama game, and they were all the Marriott ones were outrageous. And then you check this week when Alabama's playing at Georgia, and they're all like easy, like just nice, easy, normal rates. So just the insane price gouging, and something needs to be done about it. I know a lot of fans out there would agree with me on that, since you guys that travel in for Tennessee games or go follow the Vols on the road, you're running into some of this stuff too, just some of the exorbitant hotel rates that you run into.
Yep, that is not fun to deal with, and thankfully we won't have to deal with that. We won't have to deal with Tuscaloosa either trip, right? But either way, we will be swinging through that part of the country a couple times here in the next few weeks, and looking forward to seeing Mississippi State and seeing what that's all about, and seeing their beautiful press box view. It sounds like an open air press box with a great view. Not enough of those left in the SEC, so I always appreciate those, and look forward to what should be a fun environment Saturday, with Mississippi State being excited about a 4-0 start under Jeff Lebby and his second year in Starkville. They've made a pretty significant jump, it looks like, and now we'll see how much of a jump it is as the start of SEC play gives us, I think, a better idea of just where that team is in year two for that staff. But before we get to that, want to touch on the latest on the injury situation for Tennessee. We'll get to the SEC schedule news here in just a moment. But Patrick, Tennessee did release, as always, its first edition of the availability report that comes out each week on Wednesday night. And they'll have another one on Thursday night, another Friday night leading up to Saturday's game. Not sure we'll see any seismic developments with those two, but we'll see. Still watching a couple of those guys. But Tennessee kind of went ahead and revealed what I thought might be the biggest news of the week by naming Jackson Moy, senior defensive tackle, probable for this game. That obviously suggests that they feel he's going to play for this game, and that's obviously big news for Tennessee. Several other names to mention on that report, Patrick, and I'll let you get into more of that. But what did you take away from that first edition of the injury report, and how big is that if Jackson Moy indeed is back for this game?
Yeah, Ryan, I think Moy is the big development, just because of what he can bring to that defense line. That's even if he's not playing a full complement of 25, 30 snaps. Even if it's 15 snaps a game, that's 15 less snaps for Bryson Eason and or Dominic Bailey, which I think we mentioned this on the Monday podcast, but Bryson Eason was pretty honest talking about how he likes the rotation more than having to play 65 snaps a game as he had to do against Syracuse and Georgia. So maybe this one's a little bit different because you're going into an open date. It's kind of a empty the bucket kind of game that teams kind of do before these open dates. But it can help the rotation. Certainly getting Moy back. They're not going to get David Hobbs back. He's listed as out. So probably Arkansas would be the next chance. And I would think he would have a decent chance of being back for that game coming off the foot injury from the middle of preseason camp. But just getting Moy back, that's another. I mean, it's a starter for Tennessee. That's a guy that can make a difference in there and alleviate some of the workload that you have to play some of those young guys. I talking to Rodney Garner on Tuesday after our most recent podcast. He seemed to be pleased with what he's getting from Bryson Eason and Dominic Bailey, and he said moving Bailey inside on more of a regular basis was what was best for the defensive line, because it allowed them to get Tyree West and Tyree Weathersby on the field more at defensive end. And he said Bailey has been doing a good job in there. And but he also said Nathan Robinson's been doing a good job. So if your top four there in this game and even moving forward are Bailey, Eason, Moy, and Robinson, that's a pretty good quartet you can roll with. Then you get Hobbs back, and that group could be pretty good. We'll see what they do with Bailey when they are at full strength. But getting Moy back, I think, would be big for Tennessee's defensive line. This is a game where I think Tennessee has an advantage on the line of scrimmage, and they need both sides of that, the offensive line and the defensive line, to make that advantage, a reality. It looks like it on paper, but you got to go out there and play the game. So getting Moy back, I think, would be big for Tennessee, and that's what it's shaping up as. The other two are questionable. Were Dewan Morris, freshman running back, and then David Sanders is perpetually going to be questionable until I guess he returns. So we'll see how that goes. But David Hobbs ruled out. Obviously, Ricky Gibson is out. Radarius Jackson's out as well. We kind of hinted at that last week. He was in a sling before the UAB game, so he's probably going to miss more than just 2 games, I would guess. And then who's the other one? David Hobbs. Did I say Hobbs? Jerron McCoy's not out, not back yet either. But we'll see. There's some, as we've talked about, next month is looking like a potential chance for him to come back. But getting Moy back, I think it would be important for Tennessee's defense in this game. And they're not going to get all these guys back. They're not going to get both corners back. But as you slowly start to get Moy, Hobbs, if you get McCoy back at some point, that makes your defense look a lot different than maybe it has the first 4 games.
And some guys who were banged up or sat out last week against UAB also not on the initial availability report, which would be good news for Tennessee, obviously. Ethan Davis was not listed there. Desan Brame, both of those guys sat out last week. Tyree West has been banged up lately. He was not listed there. So that's seemingly good news for Tennessee. Still some intrigue over David Sanders, it sounds like. We'll see what comes of that on Saturday, but there's been at least some talk of him, maybe at least making the trip to Starkville. We'll see if that happens. But Patrick, do you have any sense yet for how would you handicap the odds of him actually being back and playing in this game, or is it just too hard to say because it's been such a weird situation to track so far this season?
It's too hard to say. It sounded like he had a pretty good chance of being back against ETSU, and then he wasn't. So I'm a little hesitant to be too declarative, I guess is the word, on what Sanders, what his status is going to be. But I would think we would know Friday night, because the Friday night report will come out after Tennessee travels. So if he doesn't make the trip, they'll have to list him as out. That's what happened with Lance Hurd at Oklahoma last season. So if he makes the trip, I would assume he's still going to be questionable. If he's anything but out on the Friday night report, then he would have presumably made the trip. But we'll just have to see that, as we've sort of talked about, and as Josh Heupel sort of talked about last week. It's just sort of a unique and unusual situation, and he is, to me at least, the very definition of out indefinitely. So air quotes there. So I'm not willing to go too far out on a limb and saying whether or not he's going to play on Saturday or not.
Yeah, either way, regardless of whether he's back for this game, it would seem to suggest there's at least a pretty good chance that he might be back after the open date against Arkansas on October 11. And I know that's how it's shaping up with David Hobbs right now. That certainly is the goal, that he'll be back for the Arkansas game in a little more than 2 weeks. And then Jermod McCoy, I think that's when we can officially begin Jermod McCoy watch. We'll see if anything changes between now and then, but there's been at least enough optimism that maybe he's back for that game, can sort of knock off the rust before Tennessee goes to Alabama a week later. So coming out of the open date, there should be a good amount of intrigue surrounding a few of those guys who've been out so far this season. And we'll see if Tennessee indeed is able to get a few of those guys back. But
that's what makes this game so important too, because if you're able to get through this month 4-1, you still got everything in front of you. Now you're getting some honestly, some of your top guys back. We throw in Hobbs. You've been pretty adamant that you thought, and relaying that maybe Tennessee thought too, that he could have a big year. Certainly know what Jackson Moy can do. David Sanders has been in their best 5, for most of the offseason. So, and then Jerron McCoy is probably their best player, at least their top draft prospect. Although, interestingly, CBS had a mock draft this week that had him and Colton Hood as first round picks. So
Yeah.
If you're able to get through this game at 4-1, you still got a pretty good chance of getting these guys back and rolling into the next portion of your schedule, closer to full strength than you've been, which would be, I think, a boost internally and certainly would boost expectations as well.
No doubt. And so we'll see what comes of that injury report on Thursday night and Friday night. We'll, of course, have updates on that each night on GoVols247.com leading up to Saturday's game. And we'll have full coverage Saturday as Tennessee arrives at Davis Wade Stadium, and we get the full glimpse of exactly what the travel roster looks like and all that. Always kind of fun to get a better sense of who Tennessee wants to travel with for these SEC games and who's kind of most important. They end up having some tough decisions to make on the back end of that travel roster, so we'll have plenty to report there over the next few days and some injuries to keep track of at least. Of course, the other big news this week, Patrick, was the official unveiling of the next 4 years of SEC rotations as part of Tennessee's or part of the SEC's new 9-game conference schedule. And it is a pretty brutal schedule, I think, for everybody. I think that is the reality everyone's kind of waking up to, that that no one's going to have an easy schedule each year. And that obviously is evident by where Tennessee starts next year. Obviously we knew the news came out before the official unveiling Tuesday night, but that the permanent opponents Tennessee will be facing each year: Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Kentucky. And then 2026, that home schedule for Tennessee is a pretty juicy one. If you are a season ticket holder, you're going to get a lot of value out of that home slate. You go to Georgia Tech that year, but you still have 5 home games against Power 4 opponents. In this case, 5 conference games at home, and they are Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky, LSU, and Texas. Texas making its first trip to Neyland Stadium. Plenty more intrigue about those next 3 years schedules after that, but obviously a pretty great home schedule there, which means a big challenge for the Vols in 2026. Patrick, you had a story breaking down 9 takeaways, so I won't ask you for all 9 of those, but what are the main points people should know about this new scheduling format, and what did you think of how it all broke down for Tennessee on Tuesday night?
Yeah, I mean, 9 takeaways for 9 conference games. I thought it was only fitting, but yeah, the big takeaway was that 2026 home schedule is fantastic. So and I had hypothesized, I don't know if I said it on this podcast, but definitely it's something I wrote. I was like, when Danny White and UT put out hey, we're raising ticket prices again, I wonder if they knew that they were getting 5 SEC home games next season, or if they knew that was going to be the 5. Because if I'm a season ticket holder, and I'm not telling anybody else how to spend their money. I know those season tickets are pretty penny, but 4% looks pretty good when that's the schedule that you get the first year. Now the rest of them aren't going to be maybe that level, but you're still going to get 5 Power 4 home games a year, because even when you have 4, that lines up with the marquee non-conference game, or the non-conference game against an ACC, Big 10, Big 12 opponent coming to Neyland. So in 27, when they have 4 SEC home games, they get Georgia Tech at home. And then 29, when they also have 4 SEC home games, they get Washington at home. So the big takeaways for me, obviously the Florida and Georgia rivalries aren't going to be annual things anymore. I think that's a big deal. Those series have been, defining for Tennessee. I mean, that's, Vanderbilt and Kentucky, that Tennessee's played those teams more often, but Tennessee's dominated those series. And really, for most of my lifetime, the defining games for Tennessee are Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Well, a couple of those now aren't going to be annual games. You're still going to play them every other year. But after Tennessee goes to Gainesville in November, they won't go back to the Swamp for another 5 years, which is kind of hard to think about. Tennessee's probably okay with that, given their track record there. But that was the other part about losing to Georgia, is you just lost 9th in a row. You're not going to get a shot next season. You're going to have to wait another year to get another shot to end that streak. So those 2 series are going away as annual things, which it's disappointing. Those are probably 2 of the bigger series, along with Alabama, LSU, that they were kind of casualties of this shift. But and I think probably Florida and Tennessee would rather play each other than Kentucky, and they're 2 of Kentucky's annual opponents. But the other thing was, the 26 and 28 schedules, they look tough. That's the tough rotation with Alabama, with Auburn, LSU, and Texas. But Tennessee gets 5 home games in 26 and 28. And they play one of their road games at Vanderbilt. So really, it's kind of like 6 home games, because I know Vanderbilt's on the upswing, and they just sold out their game against Georgia State of all people, but that stadium is still going to be predominantly orange when Tennessee plays in Nashville. So that's a nice little perk. And then just seeing some of these games, it's fitting that all this is coming out the week that Tennessee goes back to Mississippi State for the first time in 13 years. Is you're not going to go that many years now without playing these teams. Auburn's finally going to come to Neyland for the first time since 2013, something like that. LSU's coming back to Neyland for the first time since 2017. Tennessee hasn't gone to Ole Miss since 2014. Now they get Ole Miss at home first before they go back there. But you're just getting more, finally getting to play Texas, right? Those are all going to be more regular games that I think is better for fans. And go back to your point about the 26 schedule, like you're basically, you don't get the even years is when they normally get, right, Alabama and Florida at home. That's the better home schedule that they've had of late. Because they get those two games at home. Well, you don't get Florida, but you basically swap Florida for Auburn and LSU, and then you're basically swapping what would be another bye game for Texas. So to the point earlier, it's you're getting a lot more bang for your buck as a season ticket holder, and that will make things interesting. But I kind of, as you touched on too, the overarching point is that winning is going to get a lot harder. I mean, I think fans and probably more importantly the College Football Playoff Committee, they're going to have to sort of recalibrate because. You look at some of these schedules, and it's going to be hard to go 10-2, right? If 10-2 is kind of the threshold now to get into the college football playoff, you just compare, what a 9-game SEC schedule looks like, and they're having to play 10 Power 4 games. 9-3 should be maybe the threshold now, and we'll see if the college football playoff expands. But that's got to be considered because you look at next season, Tennessee could go 9-3 and have some great wins. They could beat Alabama, they could beat Auburn, they could beat LSU or Texas, and you could slip up at South Carolina where you have had trouble winning. You could lose at Texas A&M, and you could lose one of those big home games. You're 9-3 with some great wins, but also 3 losses. Is that going to be enough to knock you out? We'll have to see. That's where I would be concerned because a 9-game SEC schedule and a 9-game Big Ten schedule are in no way the same. I mean, I actually laid those out in my piece about what Georgia and Tennessee's 26 schedules look like compared to what Ohio State and Penn State are playing this year, and it's not even comparable. So we'll have to see how that goes. And, are fans going to be more willing to understand that 9-3 is okay now? You look at, this is kind of making the league more NFL-like, right? In the NFL, you're playing everybody. Everybody's pretty good. You have differentials and strength of schedule, right? And win percentages. Some teams will maybe get an easier year one year, right? You might cycle and play the bad division, aka the AFC South. Sorry, Ryan. But with the Titans in there, for the most part, everybody's going to be playing a tough schedule, and even the top seeds in the AFC and NFC usually have at least 2 or 3 losses, right? So, fans are going to have to sort of, I don't say brace themselves, but understand that you're probably, you're going to have to be really good and maybe really lucky to go 12-0 or 11-1 in a regular season with these schedules.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I go back to is, and this is sort of just the way it's worked out, so maybe it's not fair to just completely say it's been this way, but Tennessee's schedule, because Florida and Alabama were always either home or away games at the same time, it's set up for years that the even-numbered years have been almost better paths to a championship for Tennessee. In 2016, they had a chance to have a big year because they beat Florida at home, and everything was set up pretty well for them, and then that season kind of went
on to Georgia too, yeah,
beat Georgia on the road. And then 2022, they had a big year, beat Florida and Alabama at home, were undefeated until they lost to Georgia in November. So those are the years that it's traditionally been an easier setup for Tennessee because they've struggled so much to win at Florida and Alabama. Well, now it still looks like the odd-numbered years, at least on this current format, are going to be very tough for Tennessee because those are the years you got 5 road games. And, oh, by the way, Alabama is one of them each of those years. So it still looks the same in that regard. You just replace Florida with Georgia and Oklahoma as really tough games in 2027. And in 2029, Florida cycles back on as an away game, and you still go to Alabama and Ole Miss in addition to Kentucky and Mississippi State. And then what's different about this, though, is the even-numbered years, when you get the fortunate benefit or break of getting Alabama at home, you also get home games against, in 2026, Alabama or Auburn, Texas, and LSU, as you mentioned. And in 2028, it's Arkansas, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Kentucky. And in addition to that pretty tough home schedule in 2026. You go to Arkansas, to South Carolina, to Texas A&M, and to Vandy in 2028, to Auburn, Texas, LSU, and Vandy. I mean, that road schedule in 2028 with 4 road games is brutal. So as you said, I just don't see how 9-3 doesn't become the new standard of what it takes to at least have a chance to make the playoff. It may not be that 9-3 is a guarantee. You know, we'll see how many teams are actually in the playoff when it comes to that time. But this is why the SEC wanted assurances that strength of schedule was going to be a serious consideration, that it wasn't just going to come down to who wins the most games and then strength of schedule is the tiebreaker. They wanted assurances that a tougher schedule would be rewarded, because you're going to have really good 9-3 teams that just kind of beat up on each other. And if the schedule doesn't break in your favor that year, or, you know, an injury goes against you at a particular time, it's just there's nothing easy about just a meat grinder of a schedule like that. And you're going to have, oh, by the way, fewer breaks in between, because you've got 9 conference games among your 12 games. You don't have as many weeks where you're playing a UAB or an FCS team to give you kind of a breather during the middle of that. So that's the fascinating part of this, is what does the order look like? We won't find out the actual schedule until December, I believe. But, you know, that's where the rubber meets the road. You know, what does the order look like? You may have stretches where you're playing LSU, Auburn, and Alabama in consecutive weeks, or in three of those games are in a 4-week span. You know, it's going to be really, really difficult to just navigate a schedule like that when you put it all together and compress it with probably some non-conference games at the front end of that schedule.
Yeah, and to your point, I mentioned that, you know, the kind of the big 3 defining games, they're still playing Florida and Georgia regularly. All 3 of those teams, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, will be on the schedule in 27 and 29. So they're not going to play the Gators and Bulldogs annually, but because they got them on the same year, there's still that, you know, for so many years it was like, is kind of a disadvantage for Tennessee, right? Because, you know, no one else had to play those 3 teams. And those 3 teams have combined for, I think I wrote this, what was it, like 9 of the last 30 national titles or something like that. I mean, Alabama's got a bunch of them, obviously, and Georgia and Florida both won a couple in that span too. Obviously, Florida's kind of cycled a little bit down. You know, this is their 4th head coach since Urban Meyer left, and Tennessee's on their 5th since Philip Fulmer left, and Florida's probably going to be looking for their 5th new head coach since Urban Meyer left pretty soon, with how their season's going. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot tougher, and everybody's just going to have to kind of recalibrate and reassess what the line. Like, you're going to have to understand that there's going to be some seasons where, you know, it's tough to win in this league on the road. So, and then you got to win your home games. I think that's going to be key moving forward. Is you got to hold serve at home, because you're going to be playing more road games that are going to be tougher. And so, with more games against quality competition, there's inevitably going to be more losses. Just kind of how the math works. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot tougher for everyone. I know Tennessee fans were probably thinking, "Gosh, this looks really tough," but it's like that across the league. So that's I think a realization that everybody in the league is waiting for, and that's why, like you said, they wanted reassurances that, you know, the strength of schedule metric was going to change, and maybe the playoffs going to grant a few more positions and things like that to kind of account for everything getting harder in terms of the scheduling.
And I think about the back end of the conference too, where, you know, 6-6 has been this key metric that, you know, you've got to get to that to even be a respectable team, like kind of to save coaches' jobs. 6-6 team might be a pretty solid team now. I mean, because you're going to have only 3, you know, kind of gimme wins, non-conference wins, and one of those is going to be against a Power 4 opponent. So the schedule, you know, for a team like South Carolina, for instance, one of those 3 games that's supposed to be kind of a breather from your SEC schedule is Clemson. For Florida, it's Florida State. So it's just going to be so difficult. So even getting to 6 wins for some of these programs toward the back end of the conference is going to be remarkably tough. And, you know, just think back to when Tennessee really struggled in 2017 and what didn't win a conference game that year, right? That kind of year, if you ever have one, now might be 2-10 or 3-9 instead of 4-8 or 5-7. That changes the optics entirely for a lot of these coaches that are on the hot seat. If you're a Sam Pittman or someone like that at Arkansas, those 4-8 years that have you on the hot seat now become 2-10 or 3-9 years. That's a very different experience for fans. So I think everyone's going to have to kind of get accustomed to this and realize that it is a step closer to an NFL-like schedule, and there are no easy schedules out there, and there are hardly any breaks at all on these schedules for the years to come. But it was pretty eye-opening to see it all laid out. You knew what it was going to be, but man, it's going to be tough. And Tennessee, at least we get to see some different teams cycle through Neyland Stadium, and fans get to go to Austin for the first time and go back to Ole Miss for the first time since 2014 and things like that. It's going to be a lot different to not have to wait so long between visits, and no more waiting 13 years to go back to Starkville and things like that. So it should be fun for everyone, but it's going to be, man, really tough. With that being said, we've got to take a break here, and we'll get back and discuss Tennessee and Mississippi State, Tennessee's first road game of the season, after this time out on the GoVols247 Podcast. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast. Along with Patrick Brown, I am Ryan Callahan on this Thursday edition of the podcast. Thanks for joining us as always. Wherever you listen to the GoVols247 Podcast, if you wouldn't mind, please give us a rating, a review, a thumbs up if you're listening on YouTube. We are streaming these with the video side of things now, so please go check those out and follow us at GoVols247 on our YouTube page. And then also, if you're not a member of GoVols247, now is a great time to join. Of course, right here in the middle of the season, 30% off an annual subscription. If you sign up right now, you can also get pay full price for a monthly subscription, and that gets you instant access to Paramount Plus, which is one of the big perks of being a GoVols247 subscriber. So great time to join the site. Tons of team coverage, of course, this time of year, recruiting coverage, basketball season just around the corner, as we've been reminded a couple times lately. It's that fun time of year when there's just a lot going on and plenty of great things on the site and plenty to discuss as part of the GoVols247 checkerboard community. So be sure to join the site if you were not already a member. And thank you for listening wherever you listen to the GoVols247 Podcast, even if you are not a subscriber to the site. Patrick, with that being said, Tennessee kicks off against Mississippi State at 4:15 Eastern time on Saturday, Davis-Wade Stadium. As I mentioned, it's an excited fan base, I think, with the way Mississippi State has started this season. It's a whiteout game. I think Tennessee probably fortunate this is not a night game, honestly. It could be a really tough environment either way, but could be even more raucous if this was a night game, a true night game. But Mississippi State with the tip of the cap to that old Independence Bowl team that played in the snow, I believe, against Texas A&M. A pretty cool throwback to a bowl game. You don't see a lot of these with uniforms and things like that teams are acknowledging bowl games. We'll probably come to a day in the near future where no one would even consider things like that because bowl games don't matter to anyone. But back then they still mattered, and so that game gets a cool tip of the cap here. But yeah, Tennessee wearing all orange on the road for this game. And yeah, Patrick, I just want to start with Mississippi State is a more talented team than last year. They have turned over the roster pretty significantly since the Bulldogs came to Neyland Stadium last season. I think they brought in more than 60 new players since the end of last season. So it is a very different looking roster. What do you make of this team and the fact that they've started 4-0 and they have a win over Arizona State? It's obviously a game that's expected to be much more competitive than it was last year in Knoxville. But is this a game in your mind that Tennessee, should be on upset alert? Is this one that Tennessee fans should be expecting a dogfight, no pun intended, or is this one that, maybe Mississippi State's being a little bit, maybe not overrated, but maybe expectations are going to come crashing down now that they're in SEC play?
I think a little bit of both, not to ride the fence, but this is definitely a game where Tennessee, I don't think, can just show up and win like they thought they were going to do at Arkansas last season, and we saw how that went. I do get the sense that Mississippi State has Tennessee's full attention. Like, I think they're pretty locked in, and I think the improvement from the Bulldogs is the reason why. Like, I mean, like I said, if Mississippi State had come in this game 2-2 with a bad loss, or they had gotten blown out by Arizona State, maybe this game sneaks up on Tennessee. But Mississippi State's just about ranked in both polls, I think. So I think Tennessee knows that they're facing a much better team. And Chris Brazel said that this week, talking about the Mississippi State secondary. He's like, they're definitely better. That was like his first thing he said. But I also think that true too. They have played, Southern Miss, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois. Yeah, Arizona. They played Arizona State, but Arizona State also, we talk about how Mississippi State is improved. Like, look at their run defense. They allowed 216 rushing yards per game last season. That was last in the SEC by like 55 yards per game. I mean, they were porous stopping the run. Could not stop the run at all. This year they're 10th, which doesn't sound like much, but it's drastic improvement. But you look at Arizona State. Arizona State ran for like 250 yards on them. So how good are they? The secondary I think is improved. I think they're up from like 15th in the SEC in pass defense to 3rd right now, and I don't think anybody's hit 200 yards on them. But again, this is a team that's like, okay, can they do it against? Can they translate it to SEC play? That's going to be the big question. But you got to give credit to Jeff Lebby. I mean, this roster. And I had heard this going into last season that roster was in bad shape. They were going to be bad. They were bad. I don't think any of their conference losses were close. They got run out of the stadium by Toledo. They were really bad last season, and they look much, much more competitive now. And that's a credit to Jeff Lebby and Josh Heupel's talked about this a lot this week, that not only have they brought in a lot of new guys, but they've also a lot of their defense is back, right? I mean, they have some experienced guys on the defensive side of the ball that are back. And they're just improved. They're more comfortable. They're playing faster in the second year of the system. So you're seeing those things play out. And again, I think that they are improved. But again, can they translate it to not only SEC play, but I mean, I think we can view Tennessee as a upper echelon SEC team, right? Like they just went toe to toe with Georgia, who's been the top dog in this conference for a few years now. And so Tennessee's just about at that level. Can Mississippi State translate what they've done so far and make the jump to that level? That's where I have a little bit of concern for the Bulldogs. And I like I said earlier, I think Tennessee's big advantage in this game is on the lines of scrimmage. I don't see a lot of difference makers up front for Mississippi State. And their offensive line, I think, has been kind of mix and match here and there. So that's why I don't like this matchup for Mississippi State. But I mean, the path to them winning this game isn't a crazy one. If they hit some big plays, if they generate some turnovers, things they've done this season, they can certainly make this game uncomfortable, which is why I think Tennessee has to start fast and get the crowd out of the game. Because as a favorite, when you do some of those things, when you let the home team get energized with big plays, turnovers, that gets the crowd behind them, that can lead to some of that tightness that we've seen Tennessee play with in some of these games. So there's definitely a path to an upset here if Tennessee's not on its game. But I also think Mississippi State is maybe a little, their improvement is it's real, it's legitimate, but it's just another big step up from them for them in this game against Tennessee.
Yeah, so I would put it as they're a soft 4-0. I would say they're not a bad team, obviously, and I think they're capable of knocking off some solid SEC teams. But Tennessee, I still think has a clear advantage in talent. This is one of those teams on the schedule that even going on the road, Tennessee's favored for a reason, right? This is a game you're supposed to win if you're going to be a college football playoff contender, as Tennessee is obviously hoping to be. So no question, I think they've closed the gap. But is it enough that that Mississippi State should be expected to win this game? No, I'm certainly not thinking that way going into this one. But it's worth noting again, with all the new players they brought in, and they've got some good transfers. They've got a nice quarterback in Blake Shapen, who's played a lot of football in his career, transferred from Baylor in 2024. Tennessee, I think, again, clearly a more talented roster, but Mississippi State now is up to number 24 this year in the team talent composite on 24/7 Sports. That's much more in line with some of the other teams in the conference. I think they were, I don't know exactly where they were ranked last year, but they were below that last year. This year they're ranked, I think, right behind Missouri and actually ahead of Kentucky. So whereas last year, I think most people would have said Mississippi State probably had one of the worst rosters, if not the worst, in the conference. This year, they've at least gotten themselves in that discussion with some other programs that are seen as having pretty respectable rosters. So clearly,
they were 34th last season.
34th. So yeah, that's a pretty big jump. Now that doesn't get you much in the SEC. We discuss that every year. Just having a top 25 recruiting class is okay. Great, you made the top 25. That's like 13th in the SEC. So it's hard to win with just a top 25 roster nationally, but I think it shows you that the talent level is much more in line with some of Mississippi State's SEC rivals that they face every year. So yeah, definitely a nice job flipping that roster by Jeff Lebby and his staff, and I think you'll see that on Saturday. And they've won some recruiting battles here and there too, out of the high school ranks, but a lot of the work that they've done is out of the portal. Guys like Fluff Bothwell, the running back from South Alabama, fantastic name, but equally good player.
Yeah.
I think a guy that was a 4-star transfer, I believe, this past offseason. And some people wondered if Tennessee might kick the tires there at one point because the Vols were in the market for a running back. Obviously ended up going with Star Thomas, and that that's worked out well for them. But Bothwell looks like a guy that that Tennessee's going to have to certainly account for going into this game. A couple nice receivers. Blake Shapen put up some good numbers. I mean, I guess, Patrick, from what we've seen and heard so far, what do you think is the part of this matchup that maybe should catch Tennessee's attention or make the Vols most worried going into this game? Is it the receivers in that passing game, simply because Tennessee's been a bit shaky in the secondary, or is there something else that gets your attention a little bit more?
No, I think that's where I'd go. I think Mississippi State's secondary has improved. They've got a couple of nice defensive backs there. Kelly Jones is somebody that stood out to me. He's 6'4" corner. You don't see a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's only allowed like 2 catches per PFF this season. So inevitably, when Tennessee takes one of those downfield shots, whether it's Brazel, whether it's Mike Matthews, one of those guys is probably going to be matched up against him. So, after Tennessee missed some of those 50-50 balls last week, can they hit those in matchups like that? I think Mississippi State only has 5 sacks this season. So that would be my concern for Mississippi State's end is can you get any pressure on Joey Aguilar at all without having to blitz 5 and 6, which is going to leave those guys on an island. So, and if you don't get any pressure on Aguilar, he's shown that he can make some plays and his guys can make some plays and Tennessee can scheme some guys open. But on the flip side of that, though, it's hard to trust the secondary, and I'm not overreacting to them allowing 370-something yards to UAB last week. I thought the starters did pretty good, and a lot of that was some stat padding there in the second half. But just the Georgia game with, if you let a quarterback get hot like Tennessee did to Gunnar Stockton, they can make some plays. Blake Shapen's a guy that is capable of, if he can get hot, he can. He led Baylor to the Big 12 title a few years ago. So he's played in big games. I don't think anything he sees defensively is going to be tricky for him. And as you mentioned, Mississippi State's got a couple good running backs. Davon Booth is in there as well. He had a productive season last year and is back along with Bothwell. Anthony Evans is a Georgia transfer. That's what Mississippi State, I think, has done a good job of getting, is they've got several SEC transfers. I throw Brennan Thompson in there. He's a receiver that's got some speed and capable of making some big plays. And Tennessee is just their pass defense is the statistics aren't good. It hasn't looked good on the field. Again, they've played, Gunnar Stockton got hot and had a great game. Steve Angeli was leading the FBS in passing before he got hurt. And then UAB stat padded. So there's some of that too. But at the same time, Tennessee's not getting off the field on third down as much as they were last season. And they're allowing more big plays. So that would be my concern, is that you get into a game where you let Mississippi State get going early. Let them convert some third downs, let them hit some big plays. And then you're sort of in a 4-quarter, I don't say shootout, but you're almost having to match scores, and you're having to match scores with an offense that has played really well, but this is their first game together, this group on the road. So the pass defense is the big question for me, and the third down defense too, because that's areas where Tennessee, particularly third down defense, they were elite at it last season, and it's not been elite so far. So that's going to be so important for this game, is for Tennessee to try to slow the run, create some third and long situations, and then they've got to get off the field in those situations too. So I think that's the keys to me, and that's the concern for me, is on defense. I think this offense for Tennessee is legit. I think they will score points in this game. I think they'll be able to run the ball and hit some big plays over the top. And to me, the question of how comfortable or uncomfortable this game gets is how many stops can Tennessee get, and when do those stops come? Do they come early? Where Tennessee's able to, if they do start fast on offense, get some separation and take the crowd out of the game, that makes the rest of the game easier? Or is it going to be sort of a back and forth game where it goes down to the fourth quarter? And if you're needing a defensive stop, I mean, based on the Georgia game, I don't know if you have a whole lot of confidence in that, but maybe Tennessee's defense can just play better. I don't think they played great against Georgia either. I don't think they called the game particularly great. So if they can just do those things a little bit better, play a little better, pick their spots and some of their calls a little bit better too, they should be able to get enough stops that the offense should be able to do the rest and get them home from there.
You sort of got to what I was going to ask about next, which is the offense, because we've seen Josh Heupel teams just in general not be the same when they hit the road. But one of the areas where you do see some noticeable drop off is often on the offensive side of the ball. That maybe that's because of communication being more difficult on the road. Maybe it's just guys getting rattled. Last couple of years, it could arguably be as simple as the quarterback play not being very good, and those guys, struggling on the road a bit more. But what do you make of that? And how, you kind of, it sounds like you're more confident in this offense, certainly than what Tennessee had the last couple of years, not expecting a no-show like we saw against Arkansas last year, where Tennessee didn't score a point before halftime. But how well should people expect this offense to travel? And what do you think is maybe the biggest key? Is it as simple as, if they get off to a fast start, they're going to be fine. If they don't, they're in trouble? Or what does this offense need to do to ensure that the kinds of numbers they put up to this point at least carry over somewhat to going on the road in the SEC?
Well, I think they just scored 41 on Georgia, and Mississippi State is better on defense, but they're not at Georgia's level. So there's that. And I think Tennessee will be able to run the ball better in this game. They were almost, I don't want to say one-dimensional against Georgia. The run game wasn't as consistent as it has been in the other three games. The other three games they've rushed for 235 plus yards, and in the Georgia game I think they were at 125. Now the offensive line did some good things late in that game to set them up to win it, but I think the reason I'm more confident in the offense is probably the quarterback and the offensive line. They had some serious issues at offensive tackle last season. I think those have been pretty shored up. And then the quarterback's playing better. Joey Aguilar has been a lot better. I don't know that Nico necessarily got rattled on the road last season, but I got to think Aguilar is, this is not going to be, he's played in some big stadiums before. And so I think he's not going to be maybe up and down or deer in a headlight kind of thing. So
he
I
seems
think that's
fairly steady just in general.
Yeah.
It seems a little more kind of Hendon Hookerish in terms of his demeanor, and that probably bodes well for going on the road.
Right. And that can help them, as you kind of touched on, like play through some lulls, right? I mean, they kind of, they started fast against Georgia, then they had 5 drives where they didn't really do anything, but then they snapped out of it and got back on track. UAB last week, they started fast and then it was kind of just choppy from there. They missed some downfield shots, put the ball on the ground, had some penalties. But then they were able to come out in the third quarter and put together a really good drive to, get to finish on a make, so to speak. So I just think the offensive line, I just think it's better. I think that's clear. And communication is going to be key for that group, but they've executed really well. I think they've played really physical. They've got some help, I think, at some times. Tennessee seems to be doing a lot more max protect kind of calls where they do the play action shots where they keep the back and a tight end to only have 2 or 3 man routes. But those, they're able to create kind of one-on-one situations that way and take some shots. That's helped too, because you need better protection on some of those longer developing pass plays, like to let guys get downfield. And then Aguilar's giving his guys a chance. So if they're able to continue to make some of those plays, I think this offense will be fine. But to your question, I think the reason I'm probably more confident is just because the quarterback, his intangibles and his play, the way he's playing right now with Aguilar, I think is a reason for confidence. And I think the offensive line too. If you're pretty good in those situations, you should be able to win most places. And I think that's what Tennessee's got going into this game. Now we'll see. I mean, they might get outplayed in the trenches. I think that's going to be something Mississippi State has to overcome. They have to make it a little bit more even with their defensive line and on their offensive line too, to really keep this game in. Because I think that's where Tennessee has I would almost say a decided advantage in this game. And that's not to say that Tennessee's defensive line is all world or their offensive line is all world, but those have been strengths for this team through 4 games. And I have question marks about how, Mississippi State's improved, yes, but how far have they come at those position groups? I think that's still maybe where they're maybe a little bit lagging behind some of the other spots on that roster. So that I think that plays well into Tennessee's hands, in my opinion. And again, we'll see. That's why they play the games. It all could change. Lord knows some things have happened already this season that we did not see coming, and some things that we thought would happen this season have not happened. So we could all be wrong, but that's just kind of how I look at this game going into it.
Yeah, and this is a series Tennessee has mostly controlled. Their last loss in the series came on their last trip to Starkville back in 2012. But overall, they have played reasonably well at Mississippi State compared to most places in the conference. Going on the road, it's been tougher for them to win on the road. They've gone to Starkville a couple times in the last 30 years or so and been able to win there. They just haven't been there very often, and they've obviously won a lot of times in Knoxville when they have played. So this is a series Tennessee has mostly controlled. I think 30-16-1 Tennessee's record overall. Now, one interesting thing before we get out of here, Patrick, I did want to touch on this because the teams weren't competitive enough last year for this to be a factor. But this is one of those games where there's obviously a lot of crossover with these staffs, and Josh Heupel and Jeff Lebby have worked together in the past. They spent 2 years together at UCF. They both have Oklahoma connections and have spent time there together. So there's something to be said for that, and there could be some value maybe in the fact that, from my perspective, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I think the bigger value here may be that Jeff Lebby has been on the headset with Josh Heupel during games and in game planning meetings to know how he thinks maybe in certain situations. I think that may be where there's more value, but it's also worth pointing out that there's a lot of similar DNA in their offenses, even though Tennessee is doing some different things offensively this year. And Mississippi State's defense, to that point, is accustomed to going against a tempo like Tennessee's, where a lot of other teams might take a couple drives or a quarter to adjust to going against it, because even though they've played it in practice, they don't do it all the time. Well, Mississippi State does this all the time. This is sort of their system too. And so I don't think their defense is going to be as much caught off guard by what Tennessee does. So in your mind, is that a factor going into this game, that Jeff Lebby maybe knows the book on Josh Heupel a little bit more, and that this defense for Mississippi State is not going to be caught off guard as much by what Tennessee does?
I think it probably cancels each other out, right? And that's mainly more that, these defenses go against tempo more than a lot of defenses do. So I think that'll probably cancel out a little bit, just because, like I said, they see it in practice more often. So it's not like some teams that don't face tempo, kind of like you talked about. So I don't think that's a huge deal. I will say, Mississippi State, and Alec Avlin touched on this after practice on Tuesday, will play some, I don't want to say junk defenses, but they will probably play that lineup that has given Tennessee some issues, some of that 3 safety, 3 down front kind of look. Now we'll have to see if they do it the same, because Tennessee, like we've talked about, is doing some different stuff. So, can you counteract that? You're probably not going to, you may not do that when Tennessee's not spreading it field, sideline to sideline again. So, we'll have to see. Tennessee has to be able to, we hear Josh Heupel throw around the word defensive structure a lot. We'll have to see what Mississippi State throws at them, because they've got some sort of hybrid pieces, some guys that like Isaac Smith's a safety, but he lines up literally all over the field. So that's a versatile defender they can use. Some of their edge guys will also line up just as a regular linebacker. So there's some of that too, that maybe Mississippi State and, they know, like kind of talked about, maybe each other knows what kind of I don't say the kryptonite for that kind of style of offense, but they might know some things that could slow it down. Even if Mississippi State comes out and gets a couple stops early, that could be enough for them to, go out and get a 10-0 or 14-0 lead if they're able to put some drives together on offense. So there's going to be some of that in this game too, where there's going to have to be, I think Tennessee's going to have to see what they're getting and then go from there. It's maybe less so of that because they're doing more, they have more variety and they're doing some different things. But I think there's some of that in this game. But the advantage, because these guys know each other, I think that probably cancels out some. And certainly the defenses, these defenses shouldn't be caught off guard in terms of tempo because they face it so much. So if and Bryson Eason talked about that this week too. He was like, we're used to going against tempo, so we know we shouldn't allow any BS stuff because we're not ready for a play. So if that happens on either side, I think that would be disappointing from a coaching standpoint, because of like we talked about, these defenses go against tempo in practice on a regular basis. Maybe not as much in season, but certainly you can revert to your training that you went through in spring ball and preseason camp, when it was kind of, coaches were just trying to evaluate guys and you were going good on good full speed.
And scrimmaging against it and all that stuff. Yeah, you're seeing it all the time throughout the offseason. So yeah, and yeah, to that point, we think about it maybe in terms of the underdog, in this case Mississippi State, having an advantage. But to your point, it's just as much an advantage for Tennessee that they know some of the ways to maybe cause some problems for an offense like Mississippi State's, and to play with that tempo that they're going to have to keep up with now on defense. So should be a fun game. A lot of different elements to this, and a fun game for Mississippi State fans to kind of see what they have after a 4-0 start that's got fans excited. Sellout crowd expected at Davis Wade Stadium, and hope all the Tennessee fans traveling down there for the Vols' first visit to Mississippi State in 13 years have a safe trip, and be looking forward to experiencing that game day environment ourselves. But good weekend of football, some big games nationally, big games in the SEC, Alabama, Georgia, Penn State, Oregon, some other good games. So it should be a fun weekend, and we'll have plenty to discuss after this game on Saturday. We'll hope to bring you another post-game podcast Saturday night after the game as well. Plenty of coverage, full coverage on the site leading up to the game and throughout the weekend on GoVols247.com. For Patrick Brown, I'm Ryan Callahan. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the GoVols247 Podcast.